New Year is a magical holiday whose arrival is awaited by everyone, from the very young to the very old. For children, it means vacations, sweets, and gifts. For adults, it's the joy that this damn year has finally come to an end. And regardless of age, we all believe in magic. Children believe in Santa Claus and fairy tales. Adults believe that the next year will be better. But why is that? Where did all this magic come from, and what is the history of the new year? That's exactly what we'll be talking about over the next few minutes. And you can already start making a wish in the comments. Who knows, maybe this is where it will come true. Let's start with the fact that astronomy can be considered the parent of the new year. Before humanity began closely studying the movement of the sun and other celestial bodies, the very concept of a year simply did not exist. It's no coincidence that a year is the time it takes the Earth to complete one full orbit around the sun. With primitive instruments, ancient astronomers tried to synchronize human life with the way the sun behaved in the sky. In deep antiquity, this process was far from perfect. Early calendars were inaccurate, and there were dozens of different variations. But once humanity gained more or less accurate knowledge about the movement of the sun, it decided to celebrate key astronomical events on a grand scale. However, one problem remained: how do you actually define the beginning of a year? Technically, any day can be called New Year's Day, and you wouldn't be wrong. After all, 365 days after, say, September 14th, the Earth will still complete another full orbit around the sun. It's hard to imagine the bureaucratic nightmare humanity would face today trying to choose a single New Year's date. But our ancestors, fortunately, didn't have such advanced astronomy and weren't even fully sure that it was the Earth rotating around the sun rather than the other way around. So they took a simpler approach. The first documented New Year celebrations come from Babylon, about 4,000 years ago. Without overthinking it, the Babylonians chose the spring equinox as the beginning of the year. And that makes sense. The spring equinox is not only the moment when day and night are almost equal, but also the day when the center of the sun crosses the celestial equator. From an astronomical point of view, it's a perfect marker and one that can be identified even with the naked eye. The Babylonians celebrated on a grand scale. The festival of Akita began, lasting 11 days, each with its own unique ritual. Strictly speaking, Akita wasn't originally a New Year celebration. It was a festival of spring and the sky god Marduk, who defeated the sea goddess Tiamat. But politics quickly got involved, kings were crowned, reigns were renewed, marriages were arranged, and in some places Akita was even celebrated twice a year. In the common understanding of the New Year as we know it today, it was not widely celebrated, but nonetheless, it is the first well-documented case where people deliberately celebrated the change of seasons, albeit not in the way we do now. By the way, the ancient Persians followed in their footsteps and also created the festival of Nowruz in the 20th days of March to celebrate the beginning of spring. But it is not certain that the Babylonians were the first to celebrate it. The ancient Egyptians, for example, began their year with the traditional flooding of the Nile. This coincided with the rising of the brightest star in the sky, besides the sun at Sirius. One can understand the Egyptians, since their lives depended on the flooding of the Nile. Droughts simply killed entire generations, and the sacredness of the new year had not only a mythical but also a practical meaning. So the scale of the celebration when the Nile began to flood is hard to overestimate. People drank its water, considering it miraculous, visited friends, and celebrated throughout the country. Egyptians gathered by the river and enjoyed watching how the water covered their lands. Of course, at the same time, animal sacrifices were made, and people filled their stomachs to the brim. The Chinese, from ancient times, celebrated the second new moon after the winter solstice, as they still do today. No one knows exactly when this began, but it is known that they, like the Babylonians, associated the new year with the arrival of spring and relied on astronomical data. Even today, there is a strict link to the phases of the moon, and the day the holiday begins differs from year to year. The Chinese have a huge number of rituals, but for centuries they end celebrating the new year when the first full moon occurs after the new moon, that is, roughly plus or minus 15 days. This is symbolized by the Epic Lantern Festival, and even globalization does not interfere with such a unique new year, because they confidently celebrate it first with Europe and then independently. The ancient Greeks, as was typical for them, treated the holiday democratically. The only thing most residents agreed upon was the calendar. It was counted from the first Olympic Games. But regarding the date of the change of the year, everything was free. In Athens, the year ended at the end of June with the summer solstice, in Rhodes, in autumn with the equinox. In other city-states, celebrations could be found in December and March. In general, the ancient Greeks tried all possible astronomical events, solstices, equinoxes, and even with the calendar, it was the same. The year that dominated lasted 12 lunar months, and to eliminate the difference of 11 days with the solar year, every 8 years' days were added to a certain month, and the scheme constantly changed. This was reflected in the works of comedians. In Aristophanes' comedy The Clouds, the goddess of the moon expresses disapproval of the Greeks, who handled the calendar as they wished. Then came Rome. Initially, the Romans followed their ancestors and celebrated the new year on March 1st, as the day of the arrival of spring. In the 153rd year BCE, the Romans made changes, beginning to celebrate January 1st for purely political reasons. Consuls took office at that time. But the history of the formation of the new year was only beginning. At that time, the Roman year was different. It had only 355 days. The solar year was well known, and therefore, every few years, an extra month, Mercedonius, and several days were inserted so as not to fall behind solar activity and to prevent snow in summer. But politics created problems. The extra month was often shortened or lengthened to extend the term of office for convenient or inconvenient consuls. By the time Julius Caesar came to power, calendar dates differed significantly from what could be observed with the naked eye in the seasons. Caesar commissioned Alexandrian astronomers to develop a new calendar, which became known in history as the Julian calendar. Leap years were introduced, and, more or less, modern concepts of the problem of mismatched dates with the seasons emerged. Caesar solved it very simply. He added 90 days to the 46th year BCE, and the calendar began functioning in 45 BCE. It was in Rome that the new year was formalized in a modern form. Even then, school children were given a break from classes, Arabs were allowed to have fun, and everyone celebrated together. Most importantly, people exchanged gifts. Statuettes for the new year were exchanged, just as in ancient Egypt. Nevertheless, in the modern understanding of the New Year gift and tradition, we owe this to the Roman Empire, at least because under it the New Year completely detached from the seasons, astronomical phenomena, and other conventions. It became an independent holiday, which it remains to this day. However, on the path to global unity, the New Year faced new challenges. The Middle Ages cannot be called a time when humanity loved to cooperate. People preferred to fight. Thoughts about a common holiday in unified format arose only when it began to cause obvious problems, mainly related to trade and navigation. Progress in clocks and calendars also helped a unified New Year, so that everyone could know what time it was and what day it was. Yet even so, from the Roman Empire to the present, the holiday of January 1st faced a thorny path. Even Caesar's successors in the Holy Roman Empire ratified the holiday only in 1522. Half a century later, Spain and Portugal joined. Peter the Great incorporated Russia into the global holiday in 1700. Turkey and Taiwan held out the longest, agreeing to celebrate the New Year on January 1st in 1926 and 1941, respectively. Some countries, like Iran, still follow their own traditions. Remember the Persian New Year, Nowruz, on the day of the spring equinox. It is still celebrated by Iranians today. But even without them, the global New Year had to overcome another obstacle, which was a small inaccuracy in measuring the solar year in the Julian calendar. For its time, it was remarkable and groundbreaking, but after 1.5 millennia, an error of 12 minutes per year accumulated, causing a delay of 10 days from the actual date. By that time, religious full moons diverged from astronomical ones, which was, by the way, a huge problem because Easter for Christians symbolizes the end of Lent. Breaking it is a great sin. How could one correctly determine the dates of Lent when the calendar diverged from astronomy? To solve this problem, astronomers Aloysius, Orsos and Christopher Clavius in the 16th century created a new calendar, which was implemented by Pope Gregory and is called the Gregorian calendar. Why is this important? Because in countries that switched from the Julian calendar, October 4th, 1582, became October 15th, and the new year accordingly shifted as well. Initially, the Gregorian calendar was adopted mainly by Catholic countries. Russia joined later, in 1918. China approved the transition only in 1949. Some churches still do not accept it, which is why the Old New Year and different Christmas dates exist in different countries. Catholics and Orthodox Christians do not celebrate Christmas on the same days. It is the same holiday for all believers. It was also established in the Roman Empire on December 25th. But some believers follow the old calendar around January 7th, while others follow the new calendar where it is still the night of December 24th to 25th. Even among the Orthodox Greeks, the calendar is not Gregorian, but the so-called New Julian. The difference between them will become apparent only in 800 years. Until then, they are identical. Therefore, even Orthodox countries partially celebrate Christmas in December and January. In general, the essence of the history of the New Year is that all of us, regardless of faith or calendars, celebrate the same holiday. Humanity's path to it spans millennia, and it was extremely thorny. This is what should be remembered because the world around wants us to be divided and hate each other. But it is worth remembering that we are all tiny inhabitants of a planet in the scale of the universe. And until we start treating each other with respect, the world will not become better. The New Year is an excellent time to believe in magic, bury the hatchet of war, and wish all the best not only to relatives and loved ones but also to everyone around. Because if everyone does so, they in turn will receive an infinite number of equally kind wishes from all sides. And perhaps 2026 will be better than this year. Happy New Year, friends!